Okay, welcome everyone to today's online EDWeek workshop. If you have any questions throughout the whole workshop, feel free to type them in on the chat box, and then at certain times of the presentation, I'll take some time out to answer any questions. If you are interested in having this PowerPoint, please type in your email address at the chat box so that you can receive this PowerPoint later in this week. So we'll get started. My name is Wendy Musian. I'm the Outreach and Recruitment Coordinator for the College of Education, and I'll be presenting the online interview tips for this workshop. We also have some of our student ambassadors and also our career ambassadors helping me with this workshop today. So we'll get started right now. So this is all about online interview tips. There's a lot of tips we could give, and usually we will have mock interviews if this would have been done in person, but online will be a different scenario. But hopefully this workshop will help you prepare yourself for any online interviews or even phone interviews you might be having in the next few months, especially during this time where everything is done online. So you got an interview. So you've submitted many applications, struggle hard to fix your resume, and now you finally have an interview for a job. But what's next? How do you prepare? How do you prepare for now the online virtual world of having interviews over the computer or even your telephone? So hopefully these steps will help you out. So what kind of interview will you have? There's certain types of interviews. So there's a one-way video interview, there's a two-way video interview, and there's also a telephone interview. So a one-way interview, that's usually when the candidate is given a set of questions, so pre-assigned questions by the hiring committee. So once you've been given the interview and you've been given a time and date, they will give you a set of questions ahead of time. And even ask you to record yourself. So this is basically you looking into the camera and pre-recording yourself answering those questions, and then sending those answered questions to the hiring committee, and they will view your answers either later that day or later that week to make a decision if you continue on to the next interview. So usually this type of interview, the one-way interview, is used for pre-screening candidates. So if they have a large volume of different candidates for one specific position, they'll pre-screen the candidates by having them first do an interview of recording themselves by answering certain questions. So some tips to prepare for this type of interview: make sure you read and follow the instructions very carefully in your email. Always check your email during this time. So read the instructions. If you have any questions before your actual interview, ask the person who sent you that email for those answers to your questions. Make sure you note if you have a deadline. Let's say I'm the candidate, I'm applying for my current position, and I receive an email inviting me to have this type of interview. They might ask me that I have a week from today to submit my pre-recorded questions to them. So I have to make sure that I know the due date for this. So make sure you know the deadline to when you have to submit this interview. Make sure you have the login information ready. Usually these type of interviews are done through a special program that they set up, and they give you all the information and details of how to access that online program and your special password, or they'll let you know if you have to create your own account and create a password for that. Do that ahead of time. And make sure the day of, when you're ready to do your actual recording of the interview, you have that login information ready. So if it's via email, make sure you don't let that email just get lost in the sea of millions of other emails you might be receiving from other individuals or other things. But make sure you bookmark it, or just write down that login information, or even save your email as a PDF onto your computer. There's many ways to actually save that login information ahead of time. Another good tip is making sure you use the right device. A computer, I'm currently using a MacBook computer to do this workshop. So a lot of students have Macs or PC or Chromebook, some form of computer to do the interview for. Other students may want to use the cell phone. So make sure for most of the one-way interviews, just to have it handy, it is best to use your computer instead of your cell phone. If you're planning to use your cell phone, make sure, let me see if I can see myself here. Make sure instead of doing it vertical, you do it horizontal and try to have it eye level and do practice beforehand. And also have your interview answers ready. So if you were lucky enough to receive the questions ahead of time, and if they haven't sent it to you, you may ask nicely, am I allowed to have these questions ahead of time? And they send it to you, that's perfect. You have time to think about your answers, even practice them, and then just have them ready with you as you're actually recording yourself for this interview. Oops. So Elise, are there any question regarding, on the chat regarding this part?
Not yet.
Okay. So that's the one-way interview. Oops. And make sure you practice how to use your technology. Okay, so now a two-way interview. As you can tell, two-way interview is yourself talking via video chat with another person on the other side. So usually the candidate will be talking to the hiring manager or even a group of hiring managers for that specific position. So those, to prepare for that, similar to the one-way interview, just read and follow the instructions carefully. Make sure you read the email. If you have any questions, ask them before, ahead of time, just to make sure you have everything set up. Make sure you remember when your interview date and time is. Make sure you have that on the calendar. Also have the login information. So for a lot of two-way interviews, the hiring managers, they might be using Zoom, with some more popular video conference software. Many people are using today, Zoom, Google Hangouts, Skype. So you may ask ahead of time if they're not clear about what program they're using. Please ask ahead of time so that you can have that software on your computer or even your telephone. A lot of the softwares, you could have them as an app on your phone. Zoom has an app on the phone. Google Hangouts has the app on your phone, as well as Skype has the app on their phone. So you could prepare ahead of time. Consider the right device to use, computer versus cell phone. I will highly encourage using a computer if you have access to one with a camera, because your hands will be free. You'll be able to see it more clearly. You won't have to worry about getting incoming calls halfway through your interview, but instead you're just focusing on the interview on your computer. But if you have to use your cell phone, we'll talk about what you need to do with your cell phone later, but just take off your notifications and make sure you won't be bothered by any notifications like incoming calls or text messages or notifications from other apps. Pay attention to the time, and this is something I forgot to mention in the one-way interview. You are being timed, so an interview might be 30 minutes, a whole hour. If you're recording yourself ahead of time by answering those questions, you might have 1 or 5 minutes to answer those questions. So you may make sure you have a clock with you, maybe use the computer clock, have an actual clock in front of you, just so that you can make sure you don't go over the time. And then again, if for the two-way interview, if you're lucky enough to actually receive the questions ahead of time and ask, it never hurts to ask them nicely if you're able to have the questions ahead of time. Some interviewers, as they start the interview with you, may share their screen with you and actually display the questions in front of you. So then as they're asking the questions, you'll be able to see the actual questions before you, just how I'm sharing my screen right now so that everyone can see the PowerPoint. They may be sharing their screen to display the questions for you, and they might even give you like maybe 5 minutes before the official interview starts to gather your thoughts. And make sure you do have a piece of paper, pen. So a pen and then a notebook, just so that you could take notes and then just prepare yourself ahead of time, especially for those one-way or two-way interviews. And especially for any video type interview, make sure you have the latest version of your software. So the latest version of Zoom, the latest version of Google Hangouts, either on your computer or on your cell phone, the latest version of Skype on your computer or cell phone, just so that you can be up to date, and then you won't be stuck trying to figure out how to update everything at the last minute. Another type of interview you may be going through is a phone interview. So that is typically with just your cell phone or house phone, whichever telephone number you give them. And then over the phone, you'll be interviewed by the hiring managers. So again, just read and follow all the directions prior to your interview carefully. Make sure your phone is charged. Don't try charging your phone as you're talking, especially anyone who has the newest iPhones, unless you have those fancy plugs. You can't charge your phone and have your plugs plug in at the same time. So make sure you charge your phone ahead of time. Pay attention to the time as you're talking to the person over the phone. Have your interview answers ready if you were able to have the questions ahead of time. There's a better chance, since this is a phone interview, they might email you the questions ahead of time, but ask if they haven't. Ask nicely and they might provide the appropriate questions for you. Listen during the actual conversation. Listen to them ask the question, and don't dominate the conversation by just you talking so much and not letting them give you feedback or ask any other questions. Prepare your own cheat sheet, especially for a phone interview, since you can't see them. Prepare your own cheat sheet and just have notes available of the position you're planning that you're being interviewed for. Take your time and speak slowly. I don't know if you notice I might be talking faster because I myself get nervous doing just workshops. And then it is nerve-wracking to do an interview, whether if it's via phone, via video chat. So just slow down, take your time, breathe, and then if you ever get confused about the questions, just ask them again to repeat the questions. And especially for phone interviews, send a thank you email afterwards. This is also very helpful for any video interview or just any interview in general if you're lucky enough to be able to have an in-person interview or anything. Just send them a thank you email. Jared, are there any questions in the chat?
No, not at this time.
One great tip, have water, because you may be talking and start coughing.
There is one question actually.
Oh yes, what is it?
How long should we take to answer a question?
Give yourself at least 15 seconds to 30 seconds to think about the answer to your question. So within a minute, start answering that question. Especially if it's over the phone, it might be awkward for you to stay silent for too long, and a minute is pretty long. So at least answer the question at least by the minute mark. If you could do it as soon as possible, that's great, but give yourselves at least 15, maybe 20 seconds to gather your thoughts, and then make up your answer on your mind, and then respond to that. Don't just respond right away, but do consider the question, gather your thoughts, and then answer right away by the 1 minute mark. Hopefully that was I was able to answer your question. But do prepare ahead of time. I've noticed if you prepare ahead of time, even preparing questions, researching possible or potential questions they might ask you, you'll be able to answer right away or spend less time thinking about your answer and then spend more time talking. There might be some interviews, especially interviews for teaching positions or interviews in higher education, where they might have a long list of questions. They might have between 5 questions to even 12 questions they might want to ask you in a 30-minute interview or an hour interview. So try to answer within that minute or as soon as possible after you gather your thoughts. Okay.
There's also another question.
Yes.
How long do you think the question response should be? 3 minutes, 2 minutes, 1 minute? Your thought.
Personally, I believe 2 minutes, especially if you are going to be asked maybe 5 to 10 questions. I've been in interviews where I've asked an employee 6 questions in 30 minutes. So I suggest and encourage you to try to answer, like give yourself 2 minutes to answer that specific question. So use 2 minutes to answer that question. In case, even as you answer those questions, the committee might have follow-up questions based on what you answer, and that might give them time to ask more questions. So about 2 minutes. You'll be amazed if even if you time yourself answering the questions ahead of time, it doesn't take that long to answer that question. So about 2 minutes is a good middle spot to take to answer that specific question. Okay. So for these online interviews, it's still the same preparation that you would typically do, even if you were to have an in-person interview. So again, it's okay to ask the interviewer to repeat the question or to give you a moment to think. Especially if you're taking too long, you're not sure, maybe it's a question that it was unexpected. You could ask them, give me a moment to think about this question. But encourage you to prepare ahead of time potential questions based on the job you are applying. Turn off your phones and put it on night mode or put it on silent. Don't let it, don't even put it in front of you because you might get distracted as you're talking. For example, I'm talking right now, but then I might be looking at my phone right now, which is right on my side, and I might get distracted if I get a notification. So turn off your phone. If you're not using your phone, just keep it to your side. If you have a watch that vibrates and gives you notifications, maybe take that off because even the fact that you get a notification on your watch might distract you. So try to put that away. Smile. Even if you're talking on the phone, smile so that your conversation, actually you might have a more positive experience during the interview. And then just imagine yourself right in front of those individuals providing the interview for you. So just imagine you're right there in front of them. So just smile and act appropriately and dress appropriately too. So practicing for the interview. So I do encourage everyone to practice ahead of time. Right now with our online tools, I'm pretty sure a lot of you and a lot of us in the past 2 months, we've been learning how to use Zoom, Skype, Google Hangouts, anything virtually just to connect with others. So do practice ahead of time once you know when your interview will be. So practice even telling stories or talking to your friends on video chat via Zoom, Skype, FaceTime, anywhere, just so you can have that experience and don't feel so awkward using headphones, or even learning how to look at the camera and not at the video. So right now I'm looking at my screen because I'm looking at myself on the Zoom meeting, but actually I should be looking at the actual camera, which is the center, which might be awkward at first. So that's why we all need to practice how to even use our eye contact now virtually. Test your video and audio ahead of time, and then even call someone ahead of time just to get encouraged, and then just make sure everything works well, and then you talk to somebody and get encouraged before your actual interview. And then even pre-record yourself answering questions. So if you do get the questions ahead of time, or you already have a sense of what questions might be asked, or you typically just practice those typical interview questions like describe yourself, what's one strength you might have, what's a weakness you have. Pre-recording yourself ahead of time allows you to listen to yourself when you speak, allows you to check how you look and how you act on video, you could use that pre-recording with your friends so that they could give you feedback. So just practice ahead of time for all of these interviews, so you could have a successful interview once you have it. Also, right before the actual interview, do log on at least 10 minutes ahead of time to make sure you're connected, make sure your audio's working, make sure your Wi-Fi is working. Most of these interviews have a virtual waiting room similar to the one I have for this one. So at least you'll be waiting ahead of time, and then just make sure everything is working correctly. If you are using your telephone or your cell phone, make sure it's charged ahead of time. Close all other programs that you do not need on your computer. I do encourage those that might have to present work, especially those who are presenting or searching for teaching positions. They might ask you to share something over the screen via computer. Have that available, or have your resume pull up on one of those programs. But any other program you do not need, like Facebook, you don't need it up, or the notifications, you don't need to see those anymore. Just turn those off. Create a professional username, actually. So preferably use your first and last name as your professional name. Like Zoom, we could change our name, so make sure you use your first and last name. Don't just use abbreviations or just your last name or just your first name, but your first and last name. Wear earbuds ahead of time and check your audio and make sure these work. Some of us use these wire ones that connect directly to the computer. Others might use the wireless headphones that need to be charged ahead of time. So make sure you do charge those headphones ahead of time, and just test all your gear, especially the internet. One other tip that I didn't type up here is make sure your internet connection is working, and prepare a plan in case something happens. So in case your internet connection is off, don't panic. That's not your fault. Just don't panic. Check your internet connection. It is best to have your phone not close to you, but just available in case you have to jump back into the meeting or interview with your phone instead of your computer. Or if you really don't have any way to connect back to them, email them from your phone right away saying, I lost connection, I'm sorry. So just have a backup plan in case your Wi-Fi disconnects. Most of the time it's best if you could get to the router as close as possible. Okay, Elise, are there any questions in the chat during this time?
Yeah, do you recommend sitting down or standing up during an interview via Zoom?
It depends. I would encourage you to sit down if you have a comfortable chair, but then you do have to be mindful of the actual placement of your computer. So for example, my computer's on the desk and I'm sitting down on the chair, but the camera is facing up, so you could kind of see the roof of my living room. And then if I put it more straight, it blocks my head. So you have to adjust it by adding a box underneath to be able to move it up. But I would suggest sitting down, especially if it's an hour interview, so you won't get tired. But if you're the type that wants to stand up, just make sure you're standing up and you support the computer on either a stack of books or those table trays on the bed. You can use that on top of your actual desk and then put your computer on top, just making sure the camera is eye level. But I would encourage you to sit down because you might get tired of standing up, and I will get fidgety. So if you feel that you might get fidgety ahead of time, just take a seat. It's okay to sit down. Any other questions?
That's it so far.
Okay. So other tips. So I started, based on the last question, I started talking about how to adjust the computer. So the question actually of sitting up or sitting down is a very good question. So do consider that ahead of time. If you are going to sit down, make sure you have a comfortable chair, you sit up straight. Don't sit on the couch. They're comfy, but they might feel awkward. You might be, some couches are too soft and you might be falling into the couch too much. So it's best to try to have a chair, either a desk chair or even a chair for your dining table. And then make a little setup that looks professional. So make sure wherever you're sitting, whatever's in the background is professional. My background may not be as professional. I would have taken off my little photos over there because no one needs to see that. And I would have taken off my lights that are hanging out by my porch just so that it could look more clean. So just make sure you spend time to set up your whole area so that you can look professional. Wear professional clothing. Just because it's a video chat and they're only looking at your top, just dress all the way. So put a nice blouse, just nice slacks, fix your hair, make sure you look professional, even though it's a virtual interview. Even if you are doing a phone interview, do look professional. Even the fact of feeling like you're dressed for an interview, even though they don't see you over the telephone, so it helps you to get into that zone of, I'm in the interview right now. So it helps you with your mindset. Have water on hand, just how I have water on hand, because talking a lot allows your throat to be dry. So you don't want to be coughing and then going to go get water. Just have that available. Have whatever you might need, a notepad, a pen, anything you might need in your area for that interview. For those that are interviewing for a teaching position, just have whatever materials you might need, lesson plans or whatever they might have asked you ahead of time, or your resume on your computer open. Those are one of the files you might want to have open just in case they ask you to share your screen and share your lesson plan. If they told you ahead of time that you have to maybe show them a lesson plan via video chat, make sure you prepare your area as well. Get any materials you might need for that just in case they ask you to do that. For those that are looking for positions, even within the districts or even within higher education like community colleges or the universities, just make sure you have whatever you need on hand, your resume, a notebook. If you foresee them asking you to stand up to do a presentation, just have the space available to stand up to do the presentation. So that's why it's very important to do your research for each of the positions you are applying to and the positions you have an interview for. I've had interviews where I was asked to do a presentation. That was in person, but I can't imagine if I had to do a presentation now. I have to make sure my setup is appropriate for that presentation. Have your cheat sheet, I mentioned that earlier, especially facts and the mission statements of the schools or the districts that you're looking into applying. Again, do some research, check their LinkedIn accounts, check their websites, so you can have better knowledge of that school district or university or community college, or even wherever you are applying to, just so that you could know facts about them ahead of time. Do find a quiet and well-lit room. Make sure you tell everyone in your household, your roommates, your friends, your family, that you are going to have an interview at a specific time. So do tell them to be quiet, to not use, I've heard some people say don't have them use other technology so that the Wi-Fi could be stronger as you're doing your interview. Make sure you prepare your room. Make sure you have a good light. Right now I'm using a desk lamp on my computer, but if I have it towards me, it is too bright. But if I have it away from me, it kind of balances it out a little bit more. So just kind of prepare the lights around you, the clutter, just so that it could be cleaner and more prepared for your interview. Have a copy of your resume, pull it up on your computer, and also have pen and paper to take notes ahead of time. And just remember to read your email that you receive from them in detail, because they might have specific rules and regulations. In that email, they might even tell you ahead of time, you're going to be asked to do a presentation, or you're going to be asked to share these documents. Have those ready. So just make sure you read and prepare ahead of time. breathe. Don't talk too fast. Breathe. And if you feel like you can't answer a question right now as they're giving you the interview, just ask them to ask the question again, and then try your best to answer those questions. And just remember that those questions are typically the same questions that everyone are being asked for that specific position. So you're not getting a different set of questions from everybody else. They're all receiving the same set of questions. So are there any questions in the chat, Jared?
No, there's no questions.
Okay. So I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. So now I'm gonna have Ms. Isabel Dovin. She is, I'm gonna let her introduce herself. So let me put her on the spotlight. Okay.
Hi, everyone. My name is Isabel Duvon. Some of you may know me as Izzy. I graduated this spring from student teaching. I'm currently looking for a job. I'm just here to kind of share the experiences that I've had, maybe some tips that I found to be useful during this process. I've had phone interviews and one-on-one interviews with both an individual and with a small group. So some of the tips I'd like to share is that regular interview tips apply. So it's okay to ask the interviewer to repeat a question or give you a moment to think. They're expecting that. And I think I found that they appreciated that a lot more than me just beginning to stumble over my words or just try and think of a response. They know that you need a minute to process that. The next is make sure your name shows up as your first and last name. It's better if it's capitalized and they're not smushed together. If you can't change your name, make sure it's the email that you used when applying to them. And it's always good to log in 10 minutes ahead of time to make sure there aren't any connection or link issues. Sometimes Zoom links don't work. Sometimes there's some errors. It's better to log in early and notice the error than email the interviewer. And usually there's some kind of virtual waiting room, so you won't just automatically join the link, which is good. Of course, as Wendy said, close the programs on your computer. That can slow down your video and make your quality on audio and video like for the other person. So even though I look like I'm fine on my computer, if I have a bunch of tabs open, it might be significantly slower. And it's better to have a blank background, as blank and as light of a background as possible. So if you have a white wall or a beige wall, that's better than a dark background with pictures and different distractions. Also, if you can face with natural light hitting you in a way that hits the front and the side, that looks really good. It all makes the video look more high definition. And sit comfortable chair. Right now I'm sitting in a nice armchair. It's comfortable and it looks more professional than if I was sitting on a couch. So I have a little desk in front of me and I'm able to sit on a chair. And have water in hand. I tend to, as I'm sure many of you as well, get nervous during interviews. And it's a good way to have a natural pause. I found that I needed a lot of time to think about the questions before I could respond, and I didn't want to consistently be asking for another moment. So I would take a sip of water while I thought and then of the response, and then I could answer. It also helped when I got really nervous. It's a good way to regulate your breathing, and the temperature change is good for anxiety. Of course, you can always have a cheat sheet. I wrote down 3 pages of notes of one of like different teaching methods and things that I would personally implement in my future classroom, as well as information about the district and school. And another page of questions I formulated beforehand to ask the district/school or whoever was interviewing me. Interviewers really appreciated, they expressed appreciation when I asked them questions because it showed that I had done my research and was actually, I wasn't just looking for a job, I was looking for a job with their district. And it's okay if you make mistakes. Interviewers are looking not just for your answers, but also how you handle yourself in a high stress situation, which an interview is, and how you handle those mistakes or not knowing answers. I recently got through some interviewing and they ended up hiring internally, but I did so well in the interview that they reached out afterwards and asked if they could forward my resume to some other schools in the area. So if you don't get a job there, that's okay. Think of it as networking, or just practice for the next interview with a job you really are excited to work for. I also found a mentor who'd already been through the hiring process. So maybe you don't know a teacher, you don't have one in your family, but if you ask your family if they have any friends who are teachers, and maybe if you go a little further out, they might know someone. I personally didn't know any teachers beforehand. And so I reached out to my dad, who had a distant friend who was a teacher, and we connected, and she was able to answer a lot of questions for me, and I felt a lot more prepared. She also gave me a lot of tips because she had been through the hiring process for about 40 years. And also I learned a little tip that I thought was great is to help with eye contact. You can get little googly eyes and put them right next to your camera, and that helps your brain understand how to keep eye contact with the camera. Because if you just look into that camera, it kind of looks like you're looking into the void. So that could be a tip as well. Yeah, that's what I've got. That's what I've learned throughout my few interviews. If you all have any questions for me, feel free to mention them in the comments down below. All right, thanks, Wendy. Is there anything else?
Thank you, Issy. So we do have some time, and we did prepare breakout sessions. So hopefully it works. This is where I wish I would have practiced my breakout sessions skills ahead of time. So again, just as a reminder, always prepare ahead of time and learn how to use all of the links and everything online. So let me try to set up the breakout rooms right now. You'll be told on your screen just to click on something, you'll be taken to a breakout room. Okay.
Oh, I see a question down below.
Oh, yes.
Questions you got what I got asked?
Okay, yes, do so.
Yeah, I got a wide range of questions. First was just like a lot more vague of what are you looking for in school. The first phone interview I had before going into a video interview was asking me what I already knew about the school. So they had a large focus on making sure I actually wanted to work for their school in particular. So they asked me like, what do you know about our school? Did you read our mission statement? How do you fit into our mission statement? Other questions I got were, if you have a student who is struggling with this issue, what would your first response be? Or if you're having issues with a coworker, what would your first response be? None of them are trick questions that I noticed. They can be situational or, yeah, that was the main thing, situational and how I fit into the school. And they do want specifics, and so it doesn't have to be a long answer, but they do want specific responses. I was trying to be initially as concise as possible, but I was getting a lot of follow-up questions, and at one point they asked me specifically, can you add more details and specifics? Give us a few specific examples of the times you use these skills or these situations. I hope that answered that for you.
Thank you, Issy. Another potential questions for those that aren't looking for the districts, maybe they're looking not in specific teaching positions, but maybe more for administrative positions, or working in the community college or universities. They might ask you, how can you collaborate with other people? They might ask you, share an experience where you had a difficult issue, but you were able to solve it. So having, giving yourself an opportunity before the interview to think of different scenarios you've been through in your current jobs, so that you, when they ask you about experiences from your past, like when they ask, give me a time where you had to help a student in a classroom, or give me a time of when you had to lead a team, or depending on the type of interview you're doing, you already have those experiences that you've thought about written down on paper, so you won't have to be scrambling to remember something that happened in the past. Okay, so we don't have any other questions. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to put them on the chat. If not, then this is the end of our workshop for the online interview tips. Thank you for attending and thank you for bearing with us when we try to figure out the breakout sessions. For those that are going to the resume workshop, that will be starting at 4 o'clock. So hopefully we'll see you there. Thank you, everyone.